I don't know why I'm going to do this, but I am. um, before I get into section 45, before I talk about the video that got taken down, the reason why it was taken down by YouTube, they explained to me that it went against their policy of misinformation, medical misinformation, so I probably mentioned something about not probably, I did, about the jabbity jab, stabbity stab. So that's the way it goes. So but I'm going to do a video, and I'm going to talk about the Antichrist too, along with section 45. But before I do that, I'm going to do this video, and I'm going to put it out, and then I promise I will cover section 45. Just my view, it's no big deal. Most of you know more about it, this stuff, than I do. But I love section 45, and I can't wait to talk about it. But anyway, just a couple of housekeeping things. So there's been questions of why did I change, from prepaid preacher Palmer, it's kind of hard to say, to watcher Palmer. So prepaid preacher, that just hit me one day. Before I just had Scott Palmer, and then I thought, I don't know, it just hit me. I grew up loving to watch televangelists. I love Billy Graham. To this day, I know he's passed, but I love Billy Graham. Some of the others were a little more colorful that I watched when I was a kid. I'd rather watch those than cartoons. They had an influence on me. I'll just say it. I love preaching, and I love hellfire damnation talks. The old school stuff, right? It's just part of me. It's just part of me. So preacher was definitely in there. The reason why I put prepaid is that a couple of different reasons. One is that I was never looking to make any money off this channel, off anything I said or did. It's just not me to do that. And without getting critical of others that do that, I don't, okay? So prepaid. So that was one aspect of it, prepaid. The other aspect, and the most important one, is that Christ paid the debt for me, and everything I do is prepaid. So that's where that came from. The reason why I took it down was that preaching, in my opinion, had the connotation that I had some kind of authority to do it. And I love all your comments, many comments, and you're ordained, and I do have the priesthood of God, I do, and I'm worthy to bear that priesthood. Not perfect, none of us are, but worthy. I haven't done anything to disqualify, right? But I do think that there is a significance to being called and set apart to specifically preach my gospel, preach the Savior's gospel. That's not to say that I can't voice my opinion and say certain things, but preacher had the connotation that maybe I had some kind of authority, and I can see how people would perceive that. So I felt, you know what, I need to get rid of that, and then just, I'm a watcher. And I know some people have a problem with saying you're a watcher, you're not a doer, or you're this. I'm a watcher, and a doer, and a believer. So there's a little bit of that. Some people have asked what the pins are on the map. It's just places our family's gone, or individuals where we've served missions, adventures that we've been on. They used to be color coded, but I ran out of a certain color of pin, so it's just kind of mixed up. But hunting excursions I've gone on up in the Northwest Territories and Canada and whatnot, and just different things. Of course, the Middle East, Egypt, Jordan, Israel. Daughter served in the Philippines. Sons in Canada, one son in Canada, one in Texas, one in Mississippi, Louisiana area. Just stuff like that. Okay, so no big deal. We're not world travelers, but pins, and that's what those indicate. That was something else I wanted to cover. Let's see. I think this last video I did, the biggest pushback I got was the quote from Elder Gong concerning Latin America, that there'll be more members of the church from Latin America than in the US and Canada within 4 years. That's the projection. And he said that that was a fulfillment of prophecy, and that those people in Latin America were descendants of Father Lehi. So then that triggered, I'm good at triggering people. And some people have asked, well, what are Heartlanders? I say Heartlanders. Well, I've been studying this stuff for a long time, so I know I say things. It's like people who aren't members of our faith, and we say wards and stakes, and they're like, what the heck are you guys talking about? I told the story one time, a lady that worked for me for years. She was awesome. She's Catholic, and she finally said to me, she goes, why are all your bishops named Rick? And I said, Dora, what are you talking about? And she said, well, all I hear is Bishop Rick. It just made me laugh, because we just take for granted. We hear that phrase, Bishop Rick, and we all know what everybody's talking about, because it's in our culture. But someone outside of our culture, they hear just that little word, bishopric, and they're just like, gosh, every time someone gets called to be a bishop of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, their name is changed to Rick. I mean, how funny is that, right? This happens all the time. Having been involved in missionary work for many years, I've heard some great stories, been involved with people who just, these words and phrases that we use in the church, we just take for granted that everybody knows about. They don't. So when I use the word Heartland or a Heartlander, people that in the church that have never really thought much about the geography of the Book of Mormon or anything, or never studied it, they're like, what the heck is he talking about? Heartlander. So I've talked about this before, but I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this again. And I'm gonna try not to get too confrontational. I have strong opinions. And here's another thing. I know that many of those that follow all kinds of people on members of the church on YouTube, a big chunk of them are what I would say Heartlanders, and good on you. That's great. I will tell you, I am not one. And if that means that I lose every follower that I have on YouTube, so be it. Personally, I don't really care. I follow my instincts, my heart, the spirit that I feel about things. I study it out, and then I express it. And if it's disagreeable to somebody, oh well, it's not a deal breaker, but there's so much tied to where the Book of Mormon took place concerning fulfilling prophecy. And I thought Elder Gong nailed it. I thought he nailed it, because he didn't just say, he didn't end with these people in Latin America are descendants of Lehi. He said, and it fulfills prophecy. See, that's what I'm looking. I'm a watcher, right? And so I'm looking at prophecies being fulfilled currently. And when an apostle says that that's a fulfillment of prophecy, boom, that's where I wake up. If it was strictly of, oh, they're the descendants of Lehi, I'd go, oh, that's cool, that's, give me a thumbs up on that one. But the fulfillment of prophecy was the big thing for me when he said that. So back to Heartlander. A Heartlander would be someone who believes that the bulk of the Book of Mormon, other than Lehi traveling from Jerusalem past the Red Sea, build the ship, and travel, other than that part, the bulk of the Book of Mormon for a Heartlander takes place in the heartland of America. That's why we call them Heartlanders. So basically where the church, the restoration occurred. We can talk about Illinois, Missouri, that particular place. Even the final battle that they feel took place in Palmyra on the hill there. I don't like to call it the hill Cumorah. It's interesting. The book Saints, the first one, never said Cumorah. And Rod Meldrum and the Wayne May and Jonathan Neville and those guys, which I've had conversations face to face, knee to knee with Jonathan Neville, and debated, if you will, or talked about this kind of stuff. So it's not something that I'm afraid of. It's not something that I haven't studied. I've exposed myself to all those ideas. I've read their books. I have their books. But that group, they feel very strong that the Book of Mormon took place there, and so that Palmyra and the hill Cumorah in upper state New York, I'll just call it that for sake of arguing, it wasn't mentioned in the book Saints. And Rod Meldrum got so upset that he called the church and the historical department that put the book Saints forward and complained that they didn't put the word Cumorah and call the hill outside of Palmyra Cumorah. And there's a statement on the church website. I'll let you guys search it out. I've read it. It's pretty interesting that the historical department put out and said, we didn't have an agenda. We didn't put the word Cumorah there because it wasn't there. It wasn't there. Very seldom was it used in describing that hill. Even Joseph Smith's account that we have in Scripture says a hill of considerable size. So the fact that it was called Cumorah came later, and there was a big assumption that because Moroni buried the plates there, that's where the final battle was. Okay, but let's just say, just to explain Heartland, that okay, so that's where Moroni buried the plates. That's where the final battle was, in upper state New York. So you have from New York, probably as far west as Missouri. They claim or feel that Lehi landed somewhere in Florida, and then Nephi and migrated north, and that Zarahemla is Keokuk, Iowa, which I've been to, spent the night there in not the greatest motel in the world. It's right across the Mississippi River from Nauvoo, and there's a chapter, or excuse me, a section that says call that place Zarahemla. So because Joseph Smith received a revelation to call that place Zarahemla, the Heartlanders feel like that is Zarahemla, the Zarahemla that's in the Book of Mormon. So which is a huge stretch. Just because you're going to call something by a certain name doesn't mean that that was the place, right? I mean, we have in Utah, we have, you know, Manti and Lehi and Nephi and you know, all these different towns uh, all through Utah that were named, but that's not really the places that, you know, like Nephi, Utah isn't the land of Nephi in the Book of Mormon. You get my point. So, but that's what they feel, that everything was in that area. Now, most people who've studied the Book of Mormon, um, in a geological sense, feel like the bulk of the Book of Mormon took place in a very small geographic area. By small, maybe 300 miles by 200 miles or something like that. Maybe a little bit bigger. But we have pretty good evidence as you read the Book of Mormon of the distances and how far someone could travel within a day. And so when you do that, you can get a pretty good idea. So whether you're a Mesoamerican advocate or a Heartland advocate, the geography, most people feel, has to be pretty contained, other than two events: the coming from the old world, from Jerusalem to the Americas, let's just say for the sake of arguing. And then the other would be, if you're a Meso guy or gal, would be the journey that Moroni took to bury the plates in upper state New York. That's indisputable. We know where the plates were buried. So everybody agrees on that. Where the separation is there was a time period, you know, between 20 and 30 years where Moroni, basically on his own or small group, he had the plates, and it would be very, very easy to travel not only that distance, but much further in that amount of time. Now the plates, you know, 40, 50 pounds, thereabouts, heavy, bulky. How is he going to do it? Probably had animals, you know, beasts of burden. We're not talking about a people that could barely survive and barely get along. We're talking about a very intelligent, very advanced. However, war took its toll on these people, but nonetheless, they had the ability and the knowledge of how to get around. So the Meso advocates would say Moroni had plenty of time and would have probably left the battlefield where his life was in danger and not hang around that hill where the battle was to bury the plates in the very hill that all the other records were in. It you know, it doesn't quite make sense, but that's so that's kind of the two different theories. There's some other there's other theories about where the Book of Mormon took place, but I would say those are the two prominent ones. The heartland of America, and then Mesoamerica or Central America, and with the traveling of Moroni from there to Palmyra. So that's kind of the gist of it. Now, I've been, not that this qualifies me in any way, but I've exposed myself. That sounds kind of bad, doesn't it? That's like me driving without anything on. I meant the radio, right? But I've immersed myself in learning a lot of these things over the years, and I've traveled. I've traveled to the church historical sites. I've been to the mounds. I've been to and they're sacred sites. The sites of the restoration are amazing, life-changing. So there's no question there. I've also traveled extensively in Mesoamerica, and I've mentioned that before. I've been to many ruins in both Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and Belize. It's interesting because the Heartland guys will say, well, you know, those ruins down there are a lot, newer and came after the time period of the Book of Mormon, which, if you're talking about Tulum and some of the ones that are, close to Cancun and things like that, yeah, that's absolutely true. But what we find, even right by Tulum, Ekbalam and Koba, they're built on older ruins. So the time period actually really works in many of those. Chichen Itza even was dated later, and now it's getting earlier and earlier. They're saying now this has been around earlier. But beside that, you get into Tikal, which is spectacular. Yeah, the newest buildings, if you will, structures, came after. There's no question. But what they were built upon came before. And now with LIDAR, just in Guatemala, they're saying millions of people live there. Millions, which is a testament to the Book of Mormon. If you go back to the Jaredite culture in Mesoamerica, you have the Olmecs, which fit perfectly with the Jaredites. And when Corianton, the last surviving Jaredite, if you will, is found by the people of Zarahemla. He says, I witnessed 2 million of my people die in his lifetime. So let's assume that he lived, 70, 80 years, something like that. And within his lifetime, just his people. So he was in opposition of another group of people. Let's say that they had a couple of million people die in battle too. So that's 4 million people. There's no evidence of that, in my opinion, of that kind of population in the heartland of America. It just isn't the evidence. And especially if you're up in the Great Lakes, okay? North of the narrow neck of land. So the narrow neck of land for the Meso guys is Tehuantepec, the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. It's let's see. I'm not very well prepared here, but anyway, it would be like right over in. It's where it narrows down before it comes up into the Yucatan. Yeah, so Mexico kind of narrows out and then it widens out, and you have the Gulf of Mexico in there. So the Isthmus of Tehuantepec would be the narrow neck of land, where the heartland, they have multiple now. It used to be they had one narrow neck of land, and it was between two of the Great Lakes. Now they say that actually, there's multiple narrow necks of land, narrow neck of lands. Anyway, so if the narrow neck of land is in the Great Lakes, then north of the narrow neck of land would put you way up there, right? So there just isn't the population or evidence of millions of people, in my opinion, okay? So then you have to go, then you get into other things like promised land and that the Constitution and that the United States of America is the promised land, and that's where the Book of Mormon took place, was in the promised land. So then you have to go through the prophecies and of who I think everyone agrees that there's the prophecy of Christopher Columbus, a man that was wrought upon by the Spirit, and he came to the promised land. Well, if Columbus kept records, he kept journals, and he never landed in what we call the United States of America, the West Indies, and then that was his furthest north, and then every other visit he did, was it 4, I think? So I'm just going by memory. This has been a while since I've studied all this. Every subsequent voyage went further south. Okay, so if Columbus came to the promised land and it wasn't in the United States of America, then what's the promised land? Okay, and then we can find all kinds of quotes from Joseph Smith, that it's the Americas, it's North and South America. They didn't really have a Central America that they considered during the time of the prophet Joseph. And this continent meant the New World, basically, back in the 1830s and 40s. So you just have to kind of put it all together. Now, some will bristle at this, but then you have the prophecies, which we've just gone through in the Doctrine and Covenants, or not, maybe not prophecies, revelations. Let's say Revelation. And Joseph calls Oliver Cowdery and others to serve missions among the Lamanites on the edge of the wilderness, which then was Missouri, and I'll just say Indian territories because that's what they referred to them then. We don't like to use that word anymore. It's Native American or indigenous people. So this will bother some people, but in my opinion, Joseph Smith's knowledge increased as time went on concerning who were the Lamanites, who were indigenous people, who were the descendants, who were the people in the Book of Mormon. People are going to have a problem with that. But as you look at how Joseph Smith felt about things in the 1830s versus how he felt when he was in Nauvoo in the 1840s, things had progressed. Now, there was a book written by Stevens. I have it here, but I can't see it right off. Well, Stevens and Catherwood. Catherwood was the artist. They didn't have photography then. As we have no photos of Joseph Smith, it came right after Joseph Smith. So Stevens and Catherwood did extensive travels, and their book is called Incidents of Travel in the Yucatan or something like that. I can't remember, but they explored this area. Actually have gone to, in some of their travels, up and through Guatemala, through the Caribbean, and then on this cool river, and it goes into this huge lake. It's just amazing. And they went into Copan. Catherwood sketched these beautiful. His sketches are amazing of these stela, huge rock stones. You read about that in Messiah. They brought him a huge stone, and he was able to interpret this stone. Anyway, you can see that, and he sketches it. They get into Palenque, the ruins of Palenque are just spectacular, and he sketches those ruins of Palenque, or King Tikal, and the tomb of King Tikal. The actual sarcophagus, the lid of it isn't there anymore. It's in the museum, but it is. They call him Rocket Man. It's so cool to see all that. I'm just getting chills right now as I contemplate being there and seeing and feeling it. So Catherwood, Stevens is the explorer. Catherwood is recording it by sketches and other means. He sketches this book. They print it. There's a guy, a member of the church, Bernheisel, I think's his name. I'm going by memory here, folks. So Bernheisel, a bishop, I believe, or a physician, and a physician. I could be wrong about some of this, but Bernheisel gets a copy of this book. And he says, man, Joseph Smith would love this book. So I believe it was Wilford Woodruff is coming back from a mission. He checks on Bernheisel. Bernheisel says, get this book to Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith is in Nauvoo. Wilford makes it back to Nauvoo, gives Joseph the book. And read the the articles, the editorials in the Times and Seasons. Most of our Doctrine and Covenants was in the Times and Seasons, folks. The Revelations were printed in the Times and Seasons, and so were the comments about Stevens and Catherwood's book, Incidents of Travel in the Yucatan. And or I think it might have a little different title, but anyway, Joseph Smith who was the editor, says, wow, this is some of the best evidence I've ever seen. He writes a letter to Bernheisel saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. He indicates this is what he had seen in vision. So it's hard to argue. Now, Jonathan Neville made an attempt to discount the editorials written in the Times and Seasons. He wrote a book, I think it might be called The Smoking Gun or something, but it was about a guy named Benjamin Winchester. And it's a theory of Jonathan Neville that Benjamin Winchester hijacked the Times and Seasons. And at the time that Joseph was told in the Doctrine and Covenants to be the editor of the Times and Seasons, that Joseph actually had to go into hiding. This is the theory. And that he had nothing to do with writing the editorials, but Benjamin Winchester did. And when Joseph came out of hiding, he was too embarrassed to say that Benjamin Winchester wrote things that he shouldn't. And so Joseph just let it slide. So it actually wasn't Joseph writing the editorials, even though he was the editor, and he wasn't in hiding. And there's great evidence that he wasn't in hiding. But Jonathan Neville's book claims that just this Benjamin Winchester, who was later excommunicated, was the one that perpetrated and started this lie about the Mesoamerican theory, I guess, that's where the Book of Mormon took place. The interesting thing is the subsequent articles in the Times and Seasons, even after the martyrdom by both Wilford Woodruff and John Taylor, continued to talk about this wonderful book. And we have the letter from Joseph to Bernheisel thanking him for providing that book. So there's it's overwhelming evidence that Joseph, once he saw and his mind expanded because of historical evidence, explorers, travel, people exposing this idea that there were civilizations. Because up until then, everyone laughed at Joseph Smith. Not everyone. Most people laughed at Joseph Smith about the Book of Mormon, talking about these huge civilizations. They're like, there's no evidence of that. And there's obviously evidence of civilizations, and even this, like the Serpent Mount and some of these places are fascinating because they do tell the story of very, very well educated people, particularly with the heavens and the alignments of some of these mounds, and the Serpent Mount is to me is most fascinating and interesting. However, the evidence of millions and millions of people just aren't there in the Heartland. So I've talked about some things. We have Zelf. There's several accounts of Zelf. We don't have an account directly from the prophet Joseph. It's always that this is the account that we heard the prophet Joseph. That's fine. I'm not saying it didn't happen. It is interesting, though, that in a shallow grave, because they only dug a little bit to expose the bones. Some of the bones were already exposed, and they dug in, and then the name Oneiden. Anyway, that Zelf was a warrior, died in a battle. Now you guys think of this, okay? Think of it, really. Would the bones of a 1,500-year-old individual that was barely under the mounds, would those bones really survive and be there? Or was that a newer grave? Maybe a couple of 100 years old at the most. Yeah. This wasn't anything to do with the final battle. This wasn't a Nephite and Lamanite battle. But it was individuals that came later, more than likely. 1,500 years in a shallow grave, bones that are exposed deteriorate very fast. Animals eat them, they get the calcium. I've seen this stuff, right? Unless they're preserved, bones wouldn't survive that long. So we have to think we have to think about these things. Certainly could be a descendant. There was migrations. We understand that. The other aspect with the heartland is the Polynesian aspect of this. With Hagoth at the end of Alma, going in ships. He came back or he went and came back, and then he went, and I can't remember how many times, but the last time they never heard from him. Now, if you're a Meso person, it fits perfectly that they would populate islands, right? But if you're a Heartlander, the Hagoth went into the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes are somewhat of a dead end. Now you can go up, up into the Hudson Bay. I don't know if you could have negotiated a ship that way, but let's say somehow, some way, the Hudson Bay went. But then how do you get from the Hudson Bay to the Polynesian Islands? It's a little tricky. It's very tricky. Now, there's a more recent theory that the Heartlanders are gripping onto, that group of Nephites left, went the Hudson Bay, crossed back over into Europe, and then they're the ones that have, we're the descendants of that and have come back. And you can watch that on Amazon Prime, We're part of the 10 tribes, guys. We're part of the 10 tribes, or the lost tribes, let's say. That's where Ephraim got scattered. But anyway, that's just my opinion. So we have these two different theories, and the Constitution and the Promised Land, and it all had to happen here. Now, here's another interesting question about that. If at what point do you say the United States of America? Was it at the time of Joseph Smith? Did it come after? Now we have to remember that Utah was part of Mexican territory during the time of Joseph Smith. And even when the saints came here, it wasn't part of the United States of America. So at what point do you say the United States of America is only the Promised Land? Or can we include part of Canada in that, because Joseph Smith actually went to Canada? You see where it gets tricky? The United States is within the Promised Land. That's indisputable. But the prophecies being fulfilled by, as Elder Gong said, I think is pretty solid. It's hard to see prophecies fulfilled with, the 5 civilized tribes, the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cree, Seminole, and Cherokee, or other tribes of the East and Heartland, that even though we got our form of government from the 5 civilized tribes, which is absolutely true, with the presidential and the judicial and Congress, the House, those 3 branches of government, we actually got that from the 5 civilized tribes, right? And there's some awesome things. I studied Native American studies at the University of Utah. I love the culture of America. I love the Constitution. I'm all over it. However, we have to think, this is just me, you don't have to do anything. I feel like I have to think a little bit broader than the whole restoration, the whole prophecy of the second coming. Everything revolves around the Heartland. I just don't believe that. I don't believe that. It was a key sacred place where the restoration occurred. There's no question. I've been to the sites. I've been to Adamon-Diamond. You know, I've been to Jackson County. I've been to Davies County. I've also been to Nauvoo and Carthage and those places. They're sacred. They're sacred. I've been to the Susquehanna River, thinking that this might be where the priesthood was restored. I've been to those places, and I know the significance of them. However, I also know that there's significant events that took place elsewhere in the Promised Land, in the Americas. And when Elder Gong talked about prophecy being fulfilled by more people in Latin America as members of the church within 4 years than all those in in the United States of America and Canada, guys, that's significant. That's significant. And to ignore that and say and pretend, no, that has nothing to do with it because everything has to do with the Heartland. That doesn't ring true to me. So I'm addressing it. Feel free, but I will tell you, some of the comments were really not very nice, and I deleted them because I know that this Heartland idea it's very deep rooted, and people have such strong feelings about it, and so that's fine. And a lot of money's made off the books and presentations and videos. Oh, the DNA is the other thing, and the markers and all that. Now the church has a really good website, or on the church website, there's a very good article about DNA, and the church's position on DNA. And unless you have Lehi's DNA or Nephi, it's really hard. And the way we know that there were other cultures, we know that there were other migrations and people mixing, and within a short period of time, all bets are off when it comes to DNA and tracking and this and that. And these people are, Middle Eastern, and this tribe of Indian, they're not, and all that. You can't do that, in my opinion, and in the opinion of that article on the church website. It's really fascinating. I highly recommend you, do a little research on the DNA and how you cannot prove or disprove anything with the DNA. It just doesn't work. It's been too not diluted. That's not the word I'm looking for, but there's been some cross-pollination, let's say, and this is the melting pot. This is what's so cool about the Americas is the melting pot that's here. So I think I've addressed a lot of things. I've just been going off the top of my head, but I've been to so many ruins I can't even name them all. In Central America, I've felt the spirit there. I can't deny how I feel about those things. I just can't. And I've also been to the sacred sites in what we would consider the Heartland and the restoration, where that all took place. But that's how I feel. I know you're going to put all the stuff, and the letter that Joseph wrote to Emma and said, I'm looking out over the plains of the Nephites. I understand that. That was early on. And I really feel that Joseph knew more in 1840 about the geography of the Book of Mormon than he knew in the 1830s. That's just my opinion, and you can say, well, no, the Lord revealed everything to him in 1830. And so you've got to discount everything that he said in the 1840s. I disagree with that. And quite often the Heartlanders do disagree or ignore what Joseph said about the evidence that had just been uncovered by Stevens and Catherwood. They don't want to talk about that, or they try to excuse it away. So I think more and more evidence will come forth as we see it. And the reason, again, why I think this is important is that it helps us unfold the prophecies about that are going to take place prior to Christ's second coming. And that's why it's important. It's not important just to say, I know more than you know about geography. It's how are the prophecies going to be fulfilled? And if you're a Heartlander, then anything in South America, Central America, let's say, I don't even like to really say South America, but Central America, if that has nothing to do with the Book of Mormon, nothing to do with what's going to happen in the future, then that's a big deal, because then everything has to happen within the heartland, everything. And so how does that happen? How do those prophecies become fulfilled? Now you can say, well, some of the blood of Lehi got back down or went down from the heartland, and then they migrated south. The evidence doesn't show that. It shows that there were migrations from the south to the north. So into the United States. So whatever you want to think, but I'm looking at prophecies being fulfilled. And for me, Elder Gong's statement that prophecy was fulfilled was huge. It was big. Not because it validated where I think the Book of Mormon took place. It validated that we're getting closer to Christ's second coming, which is what I'm excited about. Okay. And so the next video is going to be about section 45, hopefully tomorrow. And I apologize, but I just felt like there was enough, angst against this idea that I brought up. And I know a lot of you are just, dedicated Heartlanders, and I know you're going to pound. Just try to be respectful. I think I've tried to be respectful. I know a little bit of my edginess came out in this, but you're more than welcome to put stuff. I'll leave it up if if you want to put links to their videos and things. I'll do that. I'll leave it up. But if you start getting a little mean-spirited, I'm going to delete it. And then the other thing is let's say it's always in your opinion. I find a lot of Heartlanders, they state stuff as like, this is it. And there's no other voice out there. And it's just not true. This isn't all just generated from intellectuals from BYU. That's just not true. You have to study it out. You really do. And see where all these sources come from and weigh it out. And if you come on the side of Heartland, great, more power to you. I think it's going to be difficult to see prophecies fulfilled if everything is contained within that. But that's just me. I'm looking at how things are happening currently throughout the world, fulfilling prophecy, and so my view is going to be a lot bigger, and so it's going to feel like I don't love the country, I'm not loyal, and I get that. I understand that that's going to be the feeling of many. So. Okay, I think I've covered what I wanted to, all off the top of my head. I didn't look at any notes. I could have had a few things wrong here and there, but I do tell you, I have studied this out for many years, and I never had anything against the Heartland. It's just that this is where I've come up with that it's just a little too narrow of a view, and yeah. Okay, love you all. Hope that's helpful in explaining a few things. The site for hats and shirts, the good folks that did that, it's kind of a one and done thing. If they choose to resurrect it or whatever, then they'll let me know and I'll put it up. But it, it I don't know how you're going to get the cool hat, right, or the t-shirts. I should have wore that shirt today anyway. So they're not available is the bottom line, but maybe they will be in the future, and I'll put it up there. Nobody's making money. This was just kind of a fun thing to help identify us, us cows. And anyway, section 45. I'll get to it tomorrow, I promise. And God bless, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.